can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so this video is probably gonna seem a little weird and out of nowhere coming from me, but I'm a huge fan of Gatchaman. Some of you have been with the channel for a long time. You know I'm a huge fan of Tokusatsu. If you ever show up for the Blerd Cave or Nerds of Culture streams that happen on Saturdays and Thursdays respectively, you probably heard me bring up things like Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, so on and so forth. I usually end up going into long diatribes about them if someone asks me about it, sometimes even unprovoked. And while Gatchaman is not necessarily Tokusatsu, it is very much similar in a lot of ways to Tokusatsu. Some of you don't know what Gatchaman is. It was originally over here in the States called Battle of the Planets, and at one point was even called G-Force. It's one of those series that, well, once again, Tokusatsu is usually something that's designated more for live action types of TV shows and movies. This, it just kind of looks like it. It has like a very Super Sentai look. Otherwise, normal people transforming into fabulous costumes and fighting very over-the-top villains and doing lots of hand signals and gestures and arm waves. Like I said, the trappings of Super Sentai are just kind of there. Gatchaman has a long history in Japan, considering that it came out back in 1972 under the name Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. And now Gatchaman is making this huge resurgence, and you're kind of starting to see and hear more and more about Gatchaman over the years, especially the last like couple of years. And there was just recent, I think, the announcement in May that a Gatchaman series, as a matter of fact, by the time of the release of this video, the first issue of the core series Gatchaman at Mad Cave Studios is already going to be out. I think it came out on June the 26th and is written by Cullen Bunn with art by Chris Batista. And it's a great first issue, and there's also not just that, but there is going to be an upcoming Gatchaman spin-off series all about one of my personal favorite villains in the history of anything Super Sentai or Tokusatsu, even just anime in general related, Berg Katse. If you're not familiar with the name Berg Katse, then I would say if you are more familiar with the Battle of the Planets anime, the American version of it, you'll probably be more familiar with this character by the name of Zoltar. But just so you know, I'm gonna be referring to Berg as, well, Berg. I will also be saying the name Katse the way I'm saying it because that's how I've always heard it in Japanese. So it's probably just cats, and that's cool too, but I'm gonna say it the way I have always heard it. And with the upcoming Gatchaman Galactor series coming up, a 4-part miniseries that's gonna be written by Steve Orlando with art by Kath Lobo, we're gonna be getting a little bit of a deeper dive into it, and I got the pleasure of chit-chatting with Steve Orlando about this, and we're gonna kind of do this very similar to what we did with the Gail Smo interview. I actually found this kind of fun, just sending a bunch of questions to Steve Orlando and seeing what he has to say, and I can tell you exactly what he said. So here, let's start off with the first question. How does it feel to put your stamp on a beloved franchise like Gatchaman? Steve Orlando said it's incredible, but it's not just that. I and we referring to his creative team of Kath Lobo and Frank Zavetkovich, get to put our stamps on Gatchaman. It's that the Gatchaman folks have been so open and enthusiastic about taking these characters to new places, exploring new corridors of the narrative, and getting Gatchaman stories out there that are truly unlike anything the characters have starred in before. With Galactor, we've been able to explore the organization's nooks and crannies, as well as its past, as that past comes violently crashing into its present. Tatsunoko has been intensely supportive of us breaking new ground, and that's truly the best place a creator can be. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with who Tatsunoko is, that is the production company that owns the rights to Gatchaman, which I think is actually pretty cool that they are being as open and allowing the creative team here, Steve Orlando and company, to be able to do what they want to do with this. And this kind of led me to ask, to prepare for this undertaking, was there any specific version of Gatchaman you looked back to? Like, for instance, the original series, or Gatchaman 2, or the OVA, or the live action adaptation, or the recent anime crowds, so on and so forth. Steve Orland said, "This run, be it my work or that of my peers, is very much coming from the original series, but at the same time, the mandate has been to turn over new stones within those episodes, to tell stories between the moments on screen that illustrate whole new swaths of the Gatchaman world. Yes, we're working from the original series, but between those canon moments, there are epic stories coming, just like how Shadows of the Empire or Splinter of the Mind's Eye told blockbusters in between the main Star Wars trilogy episodes, so too will we be going big and grand in between the episodes of the original series." Now, I love the fact that Steve Orland took this moment to kind of highlight those specific story arcs for Star Wars, and I will take you a step further and say that if you've never read Shadows of the Empire or Splinter of the Mind's Eye, I will tell you that if you are more a recent fan of Star Wars, or if you've ever read any of the current Star Wars comics at Marvel, it's the same thing. All of those comics take place in between the movies. Like the very earliest relaunch of Star Wars Marvel Comics took place between episode 4 and episode 5, and after that they jumped to the time between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So to kind of give you that idea, if you want a little bit more of a recent kind of idea. Like, I get Shadows of the Empire because that was kind of in my time frame, but I'm gonna show some age with that one. But to move on further from that, because I wanted to know a little bit more about how Steve Orland was going to depict Berg Katse, because Berg is one of those characters that I feel is kind of iconic among anime villains. So let's see what Steve Orland had to say. I asked the question, one Paul Heyman guy to another, how much fun is it to write the bad guy here when it's someone as grandiose as Katse? And Steve Orland replies, it's an utter blast. Bad guys are, as Paul E. says, just more interesting, right? And Berg Katse is a thrill to work with. It's a delicious mind to get into. Someone who relishes themselves, relishes their antagonism, but also comes from a place of personal pain. That's a real and at times heartbreaking person, but it's also someone who will commit some of the most twisted acts I have ever laid out from the keyboard. And I don't think this is any secret. Villains are always the most fun. It just is what it is. There's no real instance I can think of where writing a villain is not fun, except for when you're talking about like villains who are so depraved that they border on problematic. That's the only time I would say that writing a villain is probably not terribly fun, at least for me. But a character like Berg, yeah, dude, I would slay to have an opportunity to write a character like that. They're so much fun because you can just go wild with it. Yeah. The next question I asked was one thing I was very curious about, because anime and manga have a long history of characters who are either LGBTQIA+ coded or depicted as, at the very least, gender fluid, and Katse might be one of the earliest depictions of that. Did you plan on playing with that aspect of Katse in this series or fleshing them out more definitively? Steve Orland says, on this, we are currently necessitated to work within the established canon of the show as a product of fitting between the original series episodes, etc. So we have to write the Katse that appeared there, but my own personal goal is that we can build upon and flesh out his established pathos, similar to what we did on Martian Manhunter as far as his struggles with passing, something that helped him bond with his partner Diane Mead, who was struggling with the same by the vector of her bisexuality. Katse's struggle, the reason he's so arch, the reason he's so melodramatic and performative, and the internal fights that he fights daily will hopefully be illuminated in all new ways, while also fitting between what's in the show. Now, that makes a lot of sense to me, because for those who are unfamiliar, over the course of the Battle of the Planets, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman series, it was revealed that Berg Katse was very good at you jumping back and forth between different disguises, and Berg would often disguise himself as a woman. And there was even at a later point in the series, like, and I'm talking about like not the original series, but I believe it was Gatchaman 2 that may have followed after it. I might be misremembering things. There was a point where he took off his mask and revealed that he was a woman, the whole time. And it was also kind of left ambiguous in some spots. It really just kind of depends on, when you jump in on that sort of thing. But yeah, so it makes sense that that won't be addressed here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we got like some little hints and teases. You never know. I've talked a lot about Katse, but this is a book that is very much about the Galactor as a whole. The main villains of the entire series. Yes, Berg is their arch nemesis, but Berg is a part of a greater whole. So I asked the question, it seems like we'll be getting a look into more than just Katse, but also his underlings. Will we get to see some individuality amongst the worms? Maybe even some questioning of their mission. Steve Orland goes on to say, you will see some individuality for sure. You'll see a lot more of Galactor's inner workings, similar to how Andor explored Imperial middle management, but Galactor's a lot stranger than the Empire. So you'll see that just like in the show, anyone in a leadership position wears a costume. You'll see the head of mess. You'll see security captains, and you'll also see many new ranks and explore areas of Galactor never seen before. And as far as questioning the mission, that's certainly on the agenda. But the question will more so be, did they ever believe in it at all? Or do they have different, more sinister and more personal reasons for joining Galactor? I love Steve Orland for this because, as a huge Star Wars nerd, some of the ways that he is explaining this and, kind of, putting some analogies with his descriptions, it just speaks to me in a very big way. And it's because that's one of my favorite parts of Star Wars. I love when I get to see stories about Star Wars where people who work for the Empire aren't necessarily as cookie cutter villainous as you might expect. Like, one of my favorite Star Wars stories, I don't remember the exact issue that this happens in, but it's one of the more recent, like, Star Wars Marvel comic spin-off one-shots, where there's a guy who works for the Empire. He's an officer in the Empire, and yet he's not necessarily just bought in on what the Empire is selling. It's just a job for it. And I've also seen other stories where there have been characters who, they are a part of the Empire, but it was either be a part of the Empire or lose everything that they own and have, and maybe even potentially their life. So yeah, I like the idea of playing with the fact that there are people on the Galactor who might just be there because it's a job, but even more importantly, people who are there because maybe they want to do more than what the Galactor want to do. Maybe they're just using the Galactor as a stepping stone to their true goals. I think that's a very interesting place to take a character, like to make them a little more nuanced than just, hey, we want to take over the world. But that said, I also asked the question, obviously, Katse is the main event of this comic, but will we get to see characters like Gail Sadra or Count Ego Bosler get into the mix? Steve Orland replies, hopefully someday. Right now, we're functioning between the raindrops in the original series, so these stories will predate these two, but I love them both, and Galactor has been such a blast. I would drop everything to bring them in when and if the chance becomes a reality. Now, the reason why he's saying this, once again, as I stated earlier in regards to some things regarding Berg Katse, is that these are characters who came from later Gatchaman series. So once again, this is all based on the original Science Ninja Team Gatchaman / Battle of the Planets. Those characters came in later seasons and iterations. So yeah, it was one of those things that, like, and for those who are wondering why I asked that question, when it was already pretty much, kind of stated that, this is what was going to be the case. It was because the nature of the way we conducted this was I just sent in questions. It wasn't like a back and forth. It was just, hey, these are my questions. Here we go. So if it seems weird that I asked that, that's why. It was because it was all just a, hey, here's the questions, and then Steve giving me all his answers. So there you go. I'm not an idiot. But anyway, I also asked, Katse seems to be in over his head with this new threat even more so than when dealing with Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. Without giving away any major spoilers, what can you tell us about this new enemy who even the Galactor fear? Steve Orland goes on to say, I can say it's a threat that's totally unlike the Science Ninja Team, and that's what has Berg Katse on the defensive to start. The Science Ninja Team are heroes. They show up and fight Galactor in the public eye. They go undercover to stop Galactor at times, but they are on the side of good. They are on the side of people and the planet. But what Berg Katse faces in Galactor isn't on anyone's side but its own. And it's not out to save or even conquer the world. It's out to kill Galactor from the inside or out, whatever comes first. In Galactor, Katse has to clean a toxic infection out of the organization he loves or die trying. And I like that because, once again, it kind of goes back to one of my old favorite adages. The enemy of my enemy can either be my friend or my enemy. And that is something that I feel is when a writer can take control of that, that mindset, that idea, and really tell a compelling story, it just makes things even better. I feel like that is always a way more compelling way to tell the narrative, and that's what's going on here. Berg is dealing with an enemy who cannot be reasoned with or bartered with because they want to destroy what Berg is a part of. And I love the idea of that because this means that Berg has to not only fend off Gatchaman, which, once again, is not the enemy here, at least not the direct enemy, but also at the same time having to deal with this threat that operates in a completely different way. So it means he has to tackle it a completely different way than how he would Gatchaman. And as we're talking about Gatchaman, my last question was, is there any chance we see you tackle another Gatchaman series starring the Science Ninja Team or maybe another Tokusatsu inspired story in the future? Steve Orland goes on to say, there's a very good chance you'll be seeing a lot more of all of us, from Cullen on the main book, which I mentioned earlier, and then from me and Tommy Lee on the supporting minis and one-shots. And you'll note I use the plural there in both cases. I've already turned in some solo one-shots, and there are more minis on the way too. We've explored Galactor, and soon we'll be exploring yet another daring, death-defying team born of the Gatchaman universe. If you have read the first issue of Cullen Bunn's Gatchaman, there is the introduction of a beta team, a Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, who is next in line should the original members or any of the original members, whether it be Ken, Joe, Junpei, Jun, or Ryu, if any of them or all of them were to somehow be removed from the table, this beta team could step in and take their place. I wonder if that is what Steve Orland is talking about. Once again, shout out to Steve Orland for taking the time to do this, and I really appreciate it. And if you have not done so already, make sure you go check out the recent drop of Gatchaman #1 by Cullen Bunn and Chris Batista. I'll probably be doing a video on it here pretty soon. And also, if you want to check this series out, I will also have links in the description for both. Go check them out and let me know what you think about the new Gatchaman universe at Mad Cave and Galactor when they drop. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.